Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Self Validation Friday, and we're wrapping up this series, Seize Your Life, or Seize Control of Your Life with a Plan, you guys. We're wrapping it up. It's the last day. It's the last day of it's the last day of this series, and I'm so excited that you guys stay with me. And today we're talking about listen, how to what do you do, right? When life doesn't go as planned. What happens when life doesn't go as planned, you guys? I am so excited about this conversation because I think that we all have been in this situation. So my question is, who are you when things don't go your way? All right, who are you when things doesn't go your way? Um, I really like the focus for today because it's really about strengthening identity, even in disappointment, right? And anchoring the truth that your identity isn't shaken, right, by this temporary disruption. All right. All right. So today's title, or you saw the thumbnail, when the outcome shifts, I like this because do you is like when the outcome shifts, do you? I mean, do you dot question, or it could be the do you, right? That part of you, that knowing, right? People say, well, do you, boo? And this is the you today that we're talking about, right? What is the you that you gonna be doing? And hopefully that person get activated today in our life lesson. All right. Okay. So why am I having this conversation this morning? Because I know what it feels like to confuse a failed outcome, right, with a failed self. All right. When things fall apart, the loudest voice often isn't the world's, you guys. It's the one in our own heads, right? So this lesson is really about learning how to speak to yourself with truth and compassion, even when life doesn't go as planned, right? Your worth was never attached to the wind. Your worth was never attached to the wind, is not attached to the wind, right? The WIN, the wind. All right. Here's my awareness for you in action. Disclaimer. We're not just here to name the inner critic today, you guys. We're here to challenge it. All right. Awareness of your inner voice is one step, but transformation happens when you really decide to reparent that voice, right? Reparent that voice. The goal isn't to silence the critic, but it's to make sure that your truth speaks louder, right? That your truth speaks louder. Louder than what? Louder than your program, louder than the program that has overtaken us, right? All of the he said, she said of the world, right? Right. So, good morning. Good morning. I want to welcome you back to Life Lessons with Dr. Sheila Little, the creator of the Stop It Now mythology or the Stop It Now model, otherwise known as the Stop It Now success model, right? And if you're new here, I'm Dr. Sheila Little. Today I am healing, so bear with me with my voice and everything. It is self validation Friday. It is self validation Friday, and today we're talking about that voice that sticks around when the applause stop, right? When the plans fail, and when your strength feels like it's unwavering. Okay, it's unraveling. Okay, when your strength feels like it's starting to unravel, it's not the critics outside of you that does the most damage, you guys. It's the one that lives on the inside. Okay. So, but before we go into this conversation, I want you to drop a word in the chat and tell me how you're feeling this morning, right? Okay. And if you want to challenge yourself, drop a word in the chat that describes how you usually feel when things don't go your way. All right. Listen, this is a space, no judgment or anything like that. Just our presence, okay? So drop a word in the chat. Let me know how you're feeling this morning. Or let me know one word that really describes how you feel when things don't go your way. So I'm gonna do both. Today I'm feeling slow motion. I do want to say I want you guys to drop in the chat happy birthday to my brother, to my little big brother. He turns 45 today. So we want to celebrate his birthday on this great day, right? That a king was born. I love my little big brother, and he just such an amazing guy. And Chrisette Michelle had posted this post about a slow paced man. I'm gonna post it because I do feel like she was talking about my brother, right? He's out fishing right now, right? He's out fishing right now, which brings me to my word, kind of slow paced this morning. I woke up feeling my body, appreciating it as it heals, through this bug, right? And so I'm like, I'm just gonna give myself permission to slow pace it this morning. And yeah, so and then what is that one word? So we're gonna drop happy birthday to my brother. My word for the day is slow pace. But what is that word that describes how I feel when things don't go my way? I would say that that word would be peace. I really strive by this. Um, I heard this a long time ago that when you're shifting or you're creating, right, there's this duality that kind of happens. And it's like I can't even say, I would say peace beyond, I mean, one word, but it is kind of like this peace beyond my own understanding, where a part of me is like, you know, kind of freaking out. But then there's this other part of me that is just so at ease, like this is the way it goes, right? So just say, oh, so I heard this thing about, when we go to do anything, right, set an intention, automatically, right, destruction is going to happen, or some disorganization is going to happen, or some type of conflict is going to happen, right? Because that energy is kind of like you're bringing light, to a dark space. And so when things start to kind of unravel and start to fall apart, or conflict start to happen more, there's a part of me that's very appreciative, right? Like, okay, we're starting to move, right? If this momentum is going to happen, right? And so my goal is to stay the observer of it, right? And not personalize it to me. So my word would be when things start to fall apart, I guess I'll change it from peace to appreciation. Like it really allows me to know that things are going my way. I'm gonna give you an example. Like whenever I have something big to do and just say I go into the kitchen and, you know, um, I don't know, a glass drops, or I'm walking past something and, I stump my toe, or, I get in the car and like the car is stuck in like some type of thing that's pushing against me. I've learned this, so I've learned this. So my first response is typically thank you, right? Because that is the kind of conflict that needed to take place for what the breakthrough to happen. And so I'm like receiving that and receptive of that. So I'm very appreciative. On this morning, it's my brother's birthday. I'm slow paced today, and my word is appreciation. So let's get into the conversation. I want to say good morning to everyone. Good morning. It's Self Validation Friday. Self Validation Friday, you guys. And we're wrapping up again this conversation around how to seize control of your life with life choices with the plan. With the plan now, we talked about, so Pep said he's feeling cautious. Okay. And cautious is good. To me, I think that cautious is one of those very much aware, right? So as long as I'm cautious and I'm more stepping out and I'm watching, it's more like the spectators, the observer of things, just kind of taking in information, you know. So thanks for sharing, Beth. Thanks for sharing that. So we're wrapping up this series. Season control of your life with a plan. We know we talked about what the plan was. One, we got to prioritize our values, right? So if we want to start taking season our life, we have to start prioritizing our values. And if you don't know what your values are, then I think it's time to start to, meet with a therapist, go online, right? Like look at a list of values. If you guys want me to drop a list of values, a worksheet that you would like to do, put me in the chat, the hashtag me values. All right, just so you can start prioritizing those values. All right, number two, we have to understand the universal laws, right? This was what puts us in flow. Okay, so when we're seizing control of our life with the plan, we have to understand the universal laws so we can get in flow. So when we start to feel sad, we know that happiness is there. When we start to feel resistance, then we know that life is calling for some allowance, right? When and I love this one, especially for the healing part of us, right? Because I think sometimes we can get the opportunity and we'll go so high, right? But we also need to know the threshold of us, right? So what is that? What is that low point, right? And making sure that with these wins there's some humility or some balance, right? Or some reverence, right? Good morning, Lewis. There's some reverence in the balance, right? Because there is the heartbeat of life, and life is happening up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. All right. So these universal laws, really understanding that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. The law of cause and effect, right? The law of all of these laws that really come into play. So now when I'm seizing control of my life choices with the plan, like I'm understanding that my plan has to take its course through these universal laws. All right. And then yesterday, I mean, last week, we talked about action, right? Really acting in purpose and really understanding that action is required, right? We have to start to activate ourselves and move. And sometimes that could be in our energy. I talked about that yesterday, like priming our mind, right? Reading about the thing, getting information about, the life we want, visualizing, meditating, right? Really priming our brain. Why? So our nervous system can start to feel safety with this change that's been occur in our life. Or I don't even say change because I don't like the word change when it comes to us, when this evolution is going to happen, right? When I'm going to transform from a caterpillar to a butterfly, or I'm about to blossom in this way, or some growth is about to happen, right? So this evolution is happening. There's an action that's required in that. And sometimes that first action is really just priming ourselves, just having conversations about it, talking about it. And I do feel like what's coming up in my spirit is a lot of times we've been told, like, don't share your goals with people. Don't share that. And it's true because, I think a lot of times people, they are going to give a lot of people who aren't where you are, they may reflect back to you their limitations. But I think that that's also giving your power away. If you share your goal with somebody and they have the ability to talk you out of it, then that's not really their problem, right? That's some work that you still need to do on the inside and trusting yourself, right? So are you taking this information to a person to get validated? Are you taking your goals to a person to see if it's right? And if they say yes, then you're going to do it. And if they say no, then no, right? So the reason I'm saying that is because it's so important for us to prime our minds and really start to prep ourselves for these changes. And how does that happen? Through our conversation, through meditation, right? So the action doesn't always start in the physical form, right? But there needs to be some action that's happening with you energetically and emotionally, right? That's really preparing you for the change. And then this week we talk about navigating obstacles. Because listen, when I do my value, when I learn my values and I start to understand the universal laws and I get clear about, my words and things like that, guess what? Life is going to happen. Obstacles are still going to be there. And how do I navigate those obstacles while still holding true, right, to this plan that I have for my life, okay, for my life. So I think that is very important. This series was very important. It was probably a little heavier than most of my series, but I do still think that it was very important, especially if you wanted to transform your life. And today we're talking about the inner critic. So this conversation today is truly about how do we manage this inner critic, this self-talk, and this identity, right? Or the it factor, our inner voice in our identity, our inner talk and our inner talk and our identity while we're navigating life, right? This whole plan. Okay. So who this session is for? Listen, it's for you when you shut down emotionally after setbacks. All right. So who is that for? A big part of the people will shut down after setbacks. This is for you if you tie your worth with your results. Okay. If you feel like you have to keep performing to prove your value, and if you struggle to show yourself grace when you fall short, okay, when you fall short, it's difficult for you to give yourself grace. Listen, this is for you if you know how to win, but this is for you if you know. how to win, but you're still learning how to lose without losing yourself. I love that. I love that. So you know how to win, but you still need to learn how to lose without losing yourself. All right. Put a heart in the chat if that made sense, because I think that we are so good at winning, right? Like things are up and we like, yes, yes, yes. But when we lose, it's like we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We'll take, we'll start questioning God and if he's really, if God is really there, we start questioning our worth and all of those things. And we really need to learn how to lose without losing ourselves, right? And this is why it's so important to anchor in something, because life is going to happen, right? Things are not going to always go as you plan, right? But there is a plan that is bigger than yours. And how do you stay rooted, right, in your growth, in your development, even when it's not showing up in life, when it's not showing in life up in life? Okay. So here's our guiding thought for this morning. Thank you, Mama Sharon. Good morning. Good morning, Mama Sharon. All right, so here's our guiding voice. I mean, here's our guiding thought this morning. Listen, your inner voice sets the tone for your identity. Speak to yourself like someone worth loving. All right. Your inner voice sets the tone for your identity. So speak to yourself like someone worth loving. I often talk to people like you are the parent to the little child in you. Okay. So you are the parent at this point to your wounded child. You are the parent to the child that got traumatized. You are the parent to the part of you that's still learning. Okay. And because you, as the conscious being present today, are the parent to this part of you that is still maturing, think about how you would talk to your kid if they got on a bike and tried to learn a bike. One, there's a part of you that understands that this child has never been on a bike before and they may be a little scared. So you're going to encourage that child. You're going to say things like, it's okay, right? We're just going to I'm here for you, right? You're going to have some compassion and understanding because what? You know that this child has never been on a bike before. All right. When the child falls off the bike, guess what? That child not gonna want to get back on that bike again, right? But you're gonna say things to the child, what? To really get that child to believe in itself enough to get back on the bike and try it again. One, because you know the bike is rideable, right? The biggest thing is that you know this child has never rode a bike before and there's mistakes that come into it. When you're teaching your child letters and numbers, right, it can be frustrating, right? Because you got the word in front of them and you didn't said the word 50,000 times and the kid is still like, just not at all following and you get frustrated. Any of you guys have that with your kid, right? You like trying to teach them 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 1 equals 2. What does 1 plus 1 equal? And they like 5, and you like, where did you get 5 from? Right. And so there's this frustration that comes up as a parent because I want to speak to both sides of it. At that point, you realize, let me get up and let me leave before I say something to this child that's going before I hurt them. You know what I mean? This is the same mentality that we have to do with this part of us that's still maturing, right? There's a present you that's divine that knows everything, that's very aware, right, and wise. But there's a wounded you that still needs to um, be taught like how to really move, how to really navigate. And you have to really tap into your wisdom, even in those times where you're trying and trying. And it's like, let me step away from this project. Let me step away from this conflict. Let me step away before I end up saying something to myself that would hurt me. All right. All right. And also let me give myself grace, right? And let me give myself some grace, some love, and some compassion because I know that this thing that I'm trying to accomplish, my family has never accomplished before. I've probably never really seen it before. And I'm going to fail and I'm going to fall, right? And I'm going to do some things that get it wrong. But I can use language with myself that's still loving and compassionate. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, put a one in the chat for me. Okay. Put a one in the chat for me. Listen, why does this matter? Because this session is about what happens after the storm, right? So When the plan doesn't work, right? When the outcomes don't match the effort, and when the answer you prayed for really doesn't come through. All right. So why it matters is because a lot of times um there's this crash after the storm, right? When the plan really doesn't work, when the outcome doesn't match the effort, and when what you asked for or what you prayed for just didn't come through. Here's where people typically lose themselves in the letdowns, in the delays, and in the disappointments that really make you question if you're still worthy, if you're still called, if you're still capable, is it still worth it? Right, right. So here's what I'm trying to teach you on this morning, right? That your self-talk in the valley, it matters more than your self-talk on top of the mountain. Listen, we need to acknowledge there is a sense of acknowledgement when we have accomplished things, and we definitely need to celebrate our wins. Okay. But, and we need to understand and be very aware of what am I telling myself when I'm in my valley of despair. All right. Because that voice is what's building me or what's stopping me. It's what's allowing me to feel a blessing or feel the blessing or the lesson or feeling like karma or cursed or God is mad at me. You know what I mean? Or I'm doing something wrong. Listen, confidence that only works when you win, that really isn't confidence, you guys. It's codependency with the outcome. Yes, I got what I wanted, right? So you're codependent with this outcome. And so the celebration is really more celebrating that codependency than it has anything to do with your confidence or identity, right? Listen, your identity is not up for negotiation just because life doesn't go your way. Okay, your identity is not up for negotiation, right? Setbacks don't equal regression, right? It's an invitation for deeper trust, right? For deeper self trust, for deeper love, for deeper compassion, right? We want people to be around us, and you've heard me talk about this in our lowest lows, right? We want to be supported by our friends, our family, our coworkers. When we're sick, we want our jobs to understand that and to give us the time off. When we're grieving, we want people to provide us with support and encouraging words, right? We have to do it for ourselves too. All right. We have to be the thing that we want from other people. So setbacks don't equal regression, you guys. It's an invitation to really deepen your self trust. Okay. And listen, self validation isn't about pretending that it doesn't hurt. All right. It's not, it's about, so self validation is not about pretending that it doesn't hurt. It's about not abandoning yourself when it does. All right. It's about not abandoning yourself when it does. So we're gonna feel pain, right? I don't even want to be soft about that. Like it's gonna hurt, it's gonna be difficult, it's gonna be challenging, but not so challenging that I'm abandoning me in the process. I'm gonna stay anchored to this thing. And that's why we really do have to live in purpose, right? We have to have a why, right? And that why can be attached to our kids, it can be attached to, we talked about all those seven purposes in our last series, like living on purpose. And if you want to get access to that, you can join like the basic membership and get access to that series, because there are seven type of purposes, right, that we can live in: our community purpose, our vocational purpose, right, our personal purpose, right, our spiritual purpose, right? So we have to be anchored in purpose, so when the dream knocks you down, your why can stand you up. Okay. Your why will stand you up. Why am I fighting for this? Why am I standing? Why am I staying compassionate so that I can push through? All right. So here's some inner reframes for you. Instead of saying I failed, try saying I learned something that success couldn't have taught me. All right. It's a very different, I'm gonna use the word grit because that's what's coming up in my spirit. It's a very different grit that happens when you fail and you get back up and you take what you learned and you apply it to your next situation. It's kind of like it gets a little clearer. I mean, it gets a little clearer. All right. So when it didn't go the way you wanted to, there's a refining process that happens that nudges you on that second time. It nudges you on that third time. I watched this video with Beyonce's daughter, and it showed her in the concert, like in 2020, like the last concert they had. I think it was like 2022 or something like that. And then it showed her in concert like 3 years later, and you could see like the difference in her practice, in her being consistent and dancing and wanting to be on the stage with her mom, right? You can see that she put in the work. That was something that Jay Z couldn't do or Beyonce couldn't do. That was something that she had to do, even as this um, billionaire's daughter, right? She had the grit to learn how to do the dance enough to be on that stage at 12 or 12 years old. And we have to have a why that big too. Even when, I think about the people who have it, they have the money, they have the relationship, but their why is still getting them up in the morning and still pushing them. And so we really do have to encourage ourselves and have a why. So when I fail, right, I learned something that success could not teach me. So instead of saying I failed, change that language to I learned something that success can teach me. Again, instead of I must not be cut out for this, right? The thing is that this challenge is revealing my resilience, not erasing it. You know, I'm always encouraging my boys. My oldest son took a gap year. I mean, he's still in it. He's still in the gap year, and I'm slowly saying, hey, he like, but I'm not good at math, or I don't know if and I'm trying to really get them to see that. Listen, life is not about what you're good at, because you have the ability to learn, and you're gonna need a skill set to be the great father, husband, and man that God created you to be. Okay. And so instead of saying I must not be cut out for it because you didn't get the math problem right, or you got in there and you didn't really understand what the teacher was saying, that's not permission to escape that situation. That's an invitation for you to challenge yourself and do what you need to do. If it's using the tutors, if it's coming to me, asking me, right? It's a place for you to expand because now you're vulnerable, right? And you need the help. It's a place for you to be in receptive mode and receiving whatever you need so that you can learn the thing that you need to learn so that you can move forward in life, right? And this is my conversation with my 20-year-old and my 23-year-old, because you know in this that generation is like, well, if it's hard, right, then it's not cut out. And then we have a generation kind of with that same mindset. This person may not be cut out for me. This job may not be cut out for me, right? I may not be cut out for it because I may not be cut out for this because of the resistance that we feel. And I'm just going to challenge you to change that this challenge is revealing my resilience, not erasing it, right? Like, we are resilient beings. We have the ability to learn. Okay. If you went right now and you got dropped in a foreign country, you would learn their language within a year. All right. Because the brain will naturally adapt. And all too often we're not changing because we're comfortable. But when, they say that there's two times when a person will really change: when they're hit rock bottom and there's nothing else they can do, and life is just requiring it and making them, or it's an ultimate choice, like it's a deep, deep, deep desire, And some of us can get so comfortable that it's like, I need something to push me and motivate me. And that's your why. You need a why, right? You need a why. And my why had to start to be for my kids. That I'm gonna get up today so that my kids can eat. All right. I'm gonna get up today so my kids can have an experience. I'm gonna get up today so as a grandmother I can do with my grandkids that I probably wasn't able to do with my kids, because I was in school, right? So I'm looking at generations outside of me, because I fit one, the Bible says that we're responsible for 4 to 5 generations after us. But my why is attached to them. So every morning I'm giving up, every morning that I'm doing stuff, my life may be comfortable. Good morning, Miss Jackie. My life may be comfortable, but guess what? Is it comfortable enough that the residuals of my intelligence, the residuals of my income is going to not just impact my grandkids, but their kids? All right. And that's my why. And because I love my bloodline, I'm gonna get up every day to make sure that they are taken care of. All right. All right. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat. Or if you felt me on that, put a heart in the chat. And sometimes we're looking for a why that's immediate, for the booty and the tootie, for the applause, for the likes on Facebook, for those things, and that's fine if that's getting you up to date. But is that strong enough to make you continue this thing called life in a way that is loving and pleasing to you? Okay, so that's loving and pleasing to you, because here's an emotional truth that you may be carrying. If things don't go right, then I must not be right. All right, most people, right, really have this false belief that if things don't go right, I must not be right. And this session is really here to gently, right, dismantle this link between your outcome and your identity. Okay. You can grieve what didn't go your way without grieving your worth. All right. You can grieve what didn't go your way without dismantling your worth. All right. All right, you can grieve that without that. But guess what? You may need to learn that. You may need to learn how to do that. And learning how to do that is what getting with a coach, getting with a therapist, all right, getting in a program, reading some books, right? Taking 5 to 10 minutes out your day. I had a session with my client yesterday, and one second, I feel like I need to sneeze. Okay, I had a session with my client yesterday, and it was kind of a heavier session. So at the end, I said, I know that was a lot. Do you want to bring that in? And we kind of did this quick body scan, and she was like, "I'm so glad that you did that, because I always thought that I had to do it for 20 minutes or to scan my body." And I'm like, "No, we can do a 30-second, just getting present with our bodies, right?" Which we didn't do this morning. I apologize for that. Just getting present with our bodies, and so we did that real quick. But her mind had never experienced. Her mind never knew that we can take a quick minute and just do a body check in, okay, and do a body check in. So how does this connect? How does this conversation really connect with the bigger thing? Listen, on the stories we tell ourselves. We talked about that on Monday. All right, just rewriting the narrative from disappointment equals failure to disappointment actually equals feedback information. All right, right. So disappointment doesn't from we want to change the story from disappointment equals failure to disappointment equals feedback information. All right, triggers triggers by loss, right? So we want to speak with compassion to the scared part of us, all right, because we're triggered by loss, we're triggered by rejection, we're triggered by maybe not getting there, right? We're triggered by being seen. We're triggered by failure, right? But we want to speak back with that. We want to speak to compassion to that. We want to speak with compassion to that scared part of us. And then on Wednesday we talked about the obstacles, right? Real, and so we want to kind of change this to the real obstacle is not the so we talked about obstacles, and I want you to know that the real obstacle now isn't the inner story that says you're only valuable if it works. All right. So that the real obstacle now is the inner story that says, right, your real value, you that you're only valuable if it really works. All right. We have to change that, because that is an obstacle that a lot of times when we navigate life with a plan, we're faced with. And then the patterns. Do you retreat? Do you isolate or shame yourself when things really fall apart? All right. So it's really about identifying that. And then today, what are you saying to yourself when life says not yet? What are you saying to yourself when life is saying not yet? You need to learn a little more. Okay. All right. And who are you outside of what happens? Right. Who are you outside of what happened? All right. And really identifying who I am outside of this breakup, outside of this breakup with a person, with a place, or with a thing. All right. And we have all experienced breakups with a person, place, or thing, And so who am I without that thing? And know that you're still beautifully and wonderfully made without that thing, right? You know, I have this saying that I say, and I date, right? And so I have this thing when I'm dating people and things don't go right, you know. I have this saying where I would say, well, it's okay because you're going to be great and I'm going to be great. And it just baffles the guys, right? They're just like, what? You know, and I'm just like, it's okay. It's okay for us not to work out. It's okay if this is our time to exit the bus, right? The ride. I'm still going to 100%, but it's okay if we get off at 70 because you're going to still be great and I'm going to still be great. It's okay if we get off at 40. You're going to be great and I'm going to be great. It's okay. That's not stopping me from getting to the 100 that I'm going to get to, but I will willfully let you out at 70 and I don't got to judge you as nothing but great. You know what I mean? So you're going to be great and I'm going to be great. And because I'm not anchored in the outcome of that relationship, right? Or the programs or whatever. You know, I watch back the life lessons and I see my own growth, right? Like in how I'm articulating and how I read my, you know, how I develop my script and how I read my script. I'm okay with that. At this point, the comments and the likes, they're good. I like that you guys are engaging and that you're getting stuff and the feedback is good. But if it didn't come, right? It's now part of my identity because I feel like I'm doing what I was called to do and I'm learning this process of being on the internet and, you know, setting up the stuff, right? But I'm not um tied to the outcome. So it's some life lessons that do very, very well. It's some that don't, but it does not discourage me from getting on every week and still teaching how to stop it on any theme that I'm doing for the month. I'm still going to come in with that same ambition every morning to speak about what I need to speak about today. And today we're talking about that inner critic. All right. Because listen, self validation isn't a vibe, it's a practice. All right. It's not a vibe, it's a practice. All right. Self validation is active. It's really asking yourself, what do I know is still true about me, even now in this breakdown, even now in this rejection, even now in this perceived loss, what do I know to be true about me? And I'm saying, if you don't know what's true about you, that's fine. Become aware of that and now learn what's true about you, even in this breakdown, even in this rejection, even in this divorce, even in this, you know, debt, even whatever the external thing is, what do you know is still true about you? All right. And if you don't have a truth that you can lean into and be compassionate to, okay, that's where to work at. And that's okay. Let's do the work together. All right. So that we can know what that is. All right. And then the second thing is, what does God say about me that doesn't expire with this emotion? Right. What has God said about me that doesn't expire no matter how I'm feeling? If I'm feeling happy, sad, miserable, angry, right? What God said doesn't expire because of this emotion. And what has God said about me, right? You're beautifully and wonderfully made, right? You were called for a purpose. It's a lot of things, and that's why I introduced those principle verses and promise verses because I do want you to know that there's a spiritual connotation in you that is not changing because of your experience in this life. That's why I introduced the universal truths because that ain't changing because of the circumstances in your life. You know, I was talking to a parent yesterday or sometime this week, and we're talking about this gentle parenting. And I've always okay. So Miss Jackie said, also Sheila, also Dr. Sheila, don't minimize the feedback. I've learned how to deal with a lot of confronting situation by just listening and putting into practice some of what I hear you say. Thank you, Miss Jackie. Thank you. So she said, don't minimize the feedback. I've learned how to deal with a lot of confronting situations just by listening and putting into practice some of what I hear you say. Thank you, Miss Jackie. And we don't want to minimize the feedback. Absolutely, I agree with that. To add to that, Miss Jackie, we also want to make sure that our voice in which which it sounds like you're doing, right? That you're listening and you're putting it into practice. And as you're putting it into practice, some of the things I say may conflict with that, right? So we don't want to minimize the feedback, but we also want to integrate our voice with that, right? Because I have said some things that truly have challenged a lot of people, right? So how do I be compassionate with myself with this new information? Right? You just said something to me, and I get this a lot. You just said something to me, and I never saw it like that. And one of the things I say to people is that, yeah, so what you can do is take new information and apply to an old situation. So now you're feeling bad, or now you're feeling sad, or now you're feeling because you're feeling like, I wish I would have known that at 20. I wish I would have known that at 30. You know it now, right? So don't minimize this feedback and fall into a pattern of sadness and guilt and shame. Have some gratitude. Like, man, I'm glad I found that out, because in my 20s I didn't know that. In my 30s I didn't know that. And in my 40s, and now I have this new information to take forward. All right. Thank you, Miss Jackie, for that comment. All right. So I was talking to a parent the other day, when it said, what does God say about me that doesn't inspire my emotions? I was talking to a parent yesterday, and we were talking about gentle parenting, and in just this generation. And I always say that a lot of times we have to parent like nature, right? Like nature. And what I mean by that, and I talk to my kids like this too. If you put so this is what Miss Jackie was saying. I'm telling you, don't minimize our feedback to you, Miss Jackie. Thank you so much. And I don't minimize the feedback. I'm saying that with the feedback that you guys give me, I am making those adjustments and those changes. But here's the thing, in that feedback that you're giving me, so just say, I feel like you can go for 30 minutes and not an hour. I feel like you can do this or not do that. Right. I'm taking that in, but there's also an inner truth that I'm working on, Miss Jackie, of just showing up every day and being present in whatever this stop it is. Okay. Whatever it is this week. So if I don't get any comments, Miss Jackie, or if I don't get any likes, or I'm saying drop a one in the chat and I don't get that one, I'm moving forward, right? Because because I've said that this is what I want to do. All right. And the whole goal is to get better. I've called a lot of people to get their feedback, including you, Miss Jackie, right? To really get that feedback and incorporate it. But it's not for everybody. You know what it's not for everybody. But in this comment, in this space where I'm talking about the inner critic, those negative feedbacks, or not getting the views, or some shows doing better than the others, or not getting the comments, because I know that there's a wounded me, I'm very cautious in, okay, but you're new to this, right? And so we can't use their feedback, even though I love you guys. We can't use the views and the likes to give me the momentum to show up every day. I need to have that momentum to show up every day, even when nobody's watching, even when my lives are on zero, right? Even when there's only one comment, right? I'm going to treat one comment like 1,000 comments, right? I'm going to treat zero like I'm still speaking to somebody's heart out there, right? And so for me, because this conversation today is about who are you when life doesn't go as planned, right? My practice is to continue to be the person that started life lessons, that had the plan, and not allow that resistance or those outcomes to shape how I show up. All right. So I 100% appreciate the feedback. I love the DMs. I like that a lot of you guys' lives have been shifted by the information that I'm sharing. That was the whole goal, you know. But when we come on, I do feel like, and drop a two in the chat if this is you. When we go to do something, right, we do have a grand kind of idea about it, right? Miss Sharon said that's motivation within yourself. Yes. So we do have sometimes like this grand idea, like this is going to do amazing. This is going to do amazing. Okay, I'm gonna tell you guys a perfect thing. I was working with a client yesterday, and she went on a transformational journey, and she has like a lot of followers on Instagram. And she was like, and she created like a carousel wheel. And so what happened was that carousel didn't perform how she wanted it to perform. All right. And she went into a slump for like 12 hours. Okay. Like 12 hours, she said. Like She was like frustrated and annoyed and like, and like detached from her boyfriend, and he was trying to help her, and nobody could really pull her out of this slump because she had an expectation that she had a codependency with the outcome. So she did something that felt good to her. She put it out there and felt like everybody was going to like run and jump on it. It was going to get a lot of shares and a lot of comments and things like that. And when it didn't perform, it affected her in a very, 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 very deep way. And we talked about that yesterday. And she's like, and so she started to judge herself. So she put herself out of it. So that happened on Tuesday. On Wednesday, she put herself out of it, right? And so she went and did some tweaks. Yesterday was Thursday. She talked to me. She talked to me. And one of the things that we recognize is that that happened a lot. But because she started working with me, it was 12 hours and not 2 weeks, right? So it would used to be like 2 weeks she would go into a slump when her post didn't perform how she wanted to perform. So now it's 12 hours. So I'm like, okay, let's give that gratitude. Let's give that game some gratitude. And then really talking about, hey, you put that out there, right? You put it out there because you wanted it out there, right? Not for the outcome, and really detaching ourselves from the outcome, because here's the thing, that's in God's hands now. And I may have feelings about it, right? I may have feelings about it, but it's not going to be tied to my worthiness. Okay. All right. So Miss Jackie said, yes, you're walking in the scripture that says, be faithful over a little, and God will make you ruler over much. Yes, thanks for that validation, that confirmation, Miss Jackie. Yes. And so sometimes we're tied to the outcomes in our relationships, right? If our relationships don't go well, then that must mean that I must be a bad person. If the boss didn't say something about my project that I did and I didn't get the accolades that I thought I was going to get, then that we tie that to our worth. In this conversation, especially when we're navigating life's plan, we have to separate those, because we have to anchor in a space that no matter what happens on the outside of me, God still says something about me, even in these emotions, right? Even in these emotions. So again, what does God say about me that does not expire when my emotions do? When my emotions come up, when I'm sad, when I'm angry, what can I anchor that God said about me, right? And remind myself of that. All right. And I think that that's so important because we have become a society that's very outcome based. I'm good when things are good, and when things are bad, then I'm not good. And it's like, no, but you still good. And that's the simplest way. But no, you still good, right? Um, Guess what? It rains on the just and the unjust. All right, we know that that's scriptural, right? And because and everybody has ebbs and flows in life, all right, and we have seasons, and this is okay. So how can I now start to give myself grace? How can I still love me in these times where maybe life is not reflecting my value? Maybe my relationships aren't reflecting my value, but that doesn't mean I don't have whole value. All right, I still hold value, and maybe I need to hold on to this value and this worth long enough, just long enough, right, till I see a a slither of it, in an experience, right? A slither of it. And then I'm gonna hold on to that slither and until that is slither expands and gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's our responsibility to hold on to that worth and value long enough that we know we are. Even when the people in your life ain't treating you like that, even when your friends and family ain't showing up for you like that, it's still your responsibility as an adult to hold on to what your worth and value is. And if you don't know it for yourself, that's when we lean on the creator's word of who we are. We hold on to it long enough till we see the slither of light. And sometimes it comes in as a slither, right? It's not coming in like the roof is tearing off. It's a slither. And we catch that slither. And it's like, I see you. I see that moment where life is matching my worth. And it could be a person who paid for your, I don't know, coffee at, Tim Hortons when you were going through it. And I'm gonna hold on to that. Yes, I know I'm worthy of that paying it forward. I know I'm worthy of that blessing. I'm gonna hold on to that. All right. And then it grows and it grows and it grows and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Right. But it's our role to really hold on to our worth and our value and not really attach it to the outcome. All right. Listen, The storm shakes our plans, but it does not shake our power. All right. The storm is meant to shake your plan, but it's not meant to shake your power. Right? You're still powerful. You're still what the word say, you were created with love, power, and a sound mind. Right? That still exists, even in the storm. And it probably shakes everything away. You know, you might go through a foreclosure. You may have to have given up the car. You may have gotten a divorce. You may have, the kid that wanted to take a gap year, like and been in a gap year for 5 years, but that still doesn't determine, your worth or your value, right? Right? You may have gotten fired from a job. You may have been misfairly treated. You may have experienced some trauma, but those things still don't define, who you were created to be. Because listen, even Jesus, even Yahshua the Messiah experienced disappointment, betrayal, rejection, and delay. But he never doubted who he was. When people threw stones at him, when when people, even the disciples around him who were seeing these miracles happen, had doubt. He never doubted himself. You know. Now it got a little heavy when he was like, "Hey, can this cup pass me by?" But he always knew that he was the son of God and he came for a cause. All right. And our work is to really do that and figure that out. Figure out what that why is so we can anchor in that. All right. Listen, one of my clients shared with me, I'm gonna move on it to a real life example. One of my clients shared that I didn't get the opportunity I had prayed for. I smiled in public, but privately I spiraled, right? Not because I was mad at the outcome, but because I felt like I was a failure. That one no sent me into shame. That one no sent me into shame. We worked on her inner talk. And what she learned to say was that no doesn't mean I'm not worthy. It means I'm being redirected. All right. That shift took time, but it saved her so much confidence, right? It really saved her so much confidence. Listen, disappointment is real. It is so real, and we feel that, but it doesn't define us. That is the duality that we have to learn to sit in this life. You know, I'm like a tricky person. So in my mind, to me, I have sayings like your no to me is not a no to me. But when I hear no, I I don't hear it as N-O. I hear it as N-K-N-O-W. Either what do I need to know? What do I need to know? I need to learn. I need to, be patient, right? What do I need to know about me in this moment? Although I'm being faced with a no, and trust and believe, I have been faced with a lot of no's, right? I have been kicked out of college. I have failed classes, right? I had failed relationships, right? I'm a single mother, right? It's a lot of things that have happened to me in this journey of life, right? That has said, no, no, Sheila, and for me, I had to learn to separate my identity from that no and understand the KNOW. What do I need to know about me in this moment? What do I need to know in this moment? As far as like learning strategically, right? How do I move, right? And sometimes that happens just like that, you guys. And sometimes that happens after a nap. Okay, I need to take a nap, right? And sometimes that may happen over a week, but that's the position, that's the strategy. Okay, all right, because listen, disappointment is real and we feel that, right? But it doesn't define who we are, it doesn't erase that. Okay, all right, so here's your mirror check in for today. What do I typically say to myself when things don't go my way? All right, does that voice sound like truth or does it sound like fear in disguise? All right. All right. What do I typically say to myself when things don't go well? So Miss Sharon said, even in the storm, this is good. Yes, even in the storm, right? Even in the storm, um, you okay. The storm shook my plans, but it didn't shake my power. Okay. And I want to challenge I think every human is a testament of that because we've all faced storms. All right. but you got through it. Now you may not have gotten through it the way you wanted to or the way you saw yourself, but you got through it. And how I know it because you watching this now you watching this stream. Now it may have been a storm that cut you and you may see the wound or you may be healing from it, right? But it didn't take you. It didn't take your life. And because it didn't take your life, guess what? You have the power in this moment to reset and be reminded, right? To really step into this divinity, right? And we know that divinity is what? Have an ability to defy any limitation. All right. That is what your divine self has the ability to do. All right. So listen, the way I don't know if I said it, but good morning, Miss Cousin Debbie. I see you. All right. So listen, this is the insight that I want you to know. The way you speak to yourself often, the way you speak to yourself after a fall really reveals what you really believe about your worth. All right. The way you speak to yourself after a fall really reveals what you believe about your worth. We're not judging that. All right. We're just revealing that because guess what? That may be where the work is. That may be where the learning curve is. That may be where the gap is that you need to gain. Okay. All right. Because setbacks are inevitable, right? But shame, guess what? Is optional. Setbacks are inevitable, but shame is optional. You can be disappointed without dismantling your identity. You can be disappointed. You can be disappointed without dismantling your identity. Okay, listen, when you learn to validate yourself in the dark, all right, you no longer need the light to the light of external approval. When you learn how to validate yourself, even in your darkest moment, you will learn that, you know what, I don't even need everybody's approval. Hold on a second. I remember there was a time where I really needed my mom to see me, right? I like, how can I get her to love me? I'm gonna be this great daughter, all A student. I'm gonna graduate. I'm gonna do all of these things so she can know that she has like this great daughter, right? And I did, right? And once I like, you know what? I in my middle 20s. I'm like, mom is gonna feel how she feels, you know. And I walked away from it in my early 30s when I started to kind of walk on my healing journey. Um, I didn't need that anymore. Like because I started to anchor in myself. And then guess what my mom came and told me? Just out the blue one day, man, you're the best daughter in the world. Like I'm so glad. I'm gonna tell you how she said it. I'm so glad that I didn't get that abortion. That's how she said it. I'm so glad I didn't get that abortion because you are the best daughter in the world. I'm so glad that God sent you to me, right? Now, at the time, it was a time in my life I did everything to hear that from my mom, you know? And at the time she said it because and I'm giving this example because I want you to know, because I had learned to validate myself in my most darkest moments during the foreclosure, during the breakup, during the time where I had to move back in with my daddy and move back in with my mom, and I'm an educated woman. I can go out and get a job, but I knew that wasn't the answer. I knew it was something deeper inside of me. And like it felt like the world had turned on me, like, well, why don't you get a job? And why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? And I'm like, I know that I need to do something very different than what I'm doing. And I went into that place where I really started to work on me. When I came out of that, that's when she said that. And what I realized in that moment is that, thank you, mama. Thank you for that approval. But there was a part of me that knew that. So I didn't really need it. But I definitely like was thank you. Right. So listen, when you learn how to validate yourself in the dark, you no longer need the light. You no longer need light to really the light of external approval. All right. And it's in your darkest times where I do feel like you cultivate that. All right. Because it's very difficult to cultivate it when you're winning, to be honest. When you winning in life and everything is up, You know, you're in the duality, right? But in your dark times, what are you telling yourself? What are you reminding yourself of? All right. Like, listen, I had a woman who said to me, I used to hear not now, and then it would turn into never. Now I hear not now. So she used to hear not now, and she would turn it into never. And now she said, when I hear not now, I just remind myself that I'm still growing, right? So, again, that no to me is not a no to me. I'm still growing. Thank you. So she really stopped seeing it as rejection. Listen, studies show that studies in self compassion show that people who speak kindly to themselves after failure are more resilient and more likely to bounce back than those who self criticize. Again, today's conversation is about your inner critic. What are you saying when life doesn't go as planned? You can say all of the great things out in public. Yes, I'm praying for it. Everything happens for, my good. All of that, right? In performance, and we all have a performance. So in performance, but when the doors close, right? And it's just you, yourself, and you. Okay, what are you saying to yourself? All right, because studies in self compassion really just show again that people who speak kindly to themselves after failure are more resilient and more likely to bounce back than those who criticize. All right, listen, you don't have to collapse when life does. All right, you can rise not in performance, but just in your presence. All right, you can rise in your presence. All right, if that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. All right, we're gonna go through the framework. So give me about 15 minutes to kind of go through this framework. Um, Listen, we know that the it in self talk stands for identity and inner talk. All right, we started to add that identity in this series, right? When your world shakes, your words anchor you. All right. So when your world starts to shake, your words is the thing that anchors you. So you are not what didn't work out. You are who God says you are, even on the days that you don't feel like that. All right. So you are not what doesn't work, that you are not what didn't work out for you. All right. You are what God says you are, even when the days don't feel like it, or even on days that you don't feel like that. All right. Even though you don't feel like that, there's still a knowing and a presence and a divinity that's there. That's there. Okay. Listen, obstacles don't just teach you. So here's 7 things, right, that I want to talk about. The number one, obstacles don't just test your path, they expose your voice. All right. Obstacles don't just test your path, they expose your voice. Listen, it's not the obstacle that breaks you, it's how you speak to yourself in the middle of it. All right. It's how you speak to yourself in the middle of it. When life doesn't go as planned, your inner voice reveals whether you're nurturing shame or self trust. All right. Are you watering shame? Are you validating the shame that you probably came into this situation with, right? More than likely, you came into the situation with shame. So, are you watering shame or are you watering self trust? All right. I always mess up because this is hard, but I've been through hard things before, right? We can change that. We can change it from I always mess up to this is hard, but I've been through hard things before. Okay, this is hard, but I've been through harder. This is hard, but this too shall pass. I'm gonna get through this. This is hard. Uh, I always mess up. This is hard, but I've been through the storm, right? And I've seen how God has replaced it. Or you can say anything outside of I always mess this up, or I always mess things up. All right, all right. So just some language, and I say our biggest barrier sometimes is our language. All right, number two, disappointment isn't an identity crisis unless you make it one. All right, disappointment isn't an identity crisis unless you make it one. Listen, you have been conditioned to equate setbacks with failure. All right. So you may say, it doesn't work out, maybe I'm not enough. And the truth is, what fell apart wasn't your identity, right? It was your expectation. All right. I want to say that one more time. Listen, disappointment isn't an identity crisis unless you make it an identity crisis. So when you say if it didn't work out, maybe I'm not enough, the truth is what fell apart was never your identity. Your identity never fell apart. It was the expectation that you had, right? That changed. It was the expectation that you had that didn't fall through. And where's the expectation? Outside of you, outside of you. And then, and what's coming up in my spirit is then we'll say something like, and that's why I don't expect nothing from people because people don't show up how you want need them to. And I don't think that you shouldn't have a standard in life. But what I do feel like is that we should be flexible enough to understand one, that everybody ain't gonna meet our standard. And sometimes it's gonna be difficult for us to meet our standard. But guess what? Because I'm human, right? This standard is there as a way for me to communicate my who I am and my characteristics, things like that. But when that standard doesn't fall through, when when that standard doesn't fall through, or when that expectation isn't met, it's not like don't have the expectation. It's just don't tie your identity to that, right? Because you still beautifully and wonderfully made. You still created with love, power, to sound mind, right? You still have an identity that's so separate from that expectation. Okay, that's a moment in time, and we know. I always say this: you can take a picture of somebody at any time, right? Any season of their life, we can take a picture. And if you took a still moment of a person's timeline and tried to say who this person is based off of a time in their life, good, bad, or indifferent. You could take a shot at them and say prime, right? And say, oh, this person is successful because they've been able to do da 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 da. And you will find a place on their timeline where that story don't match. That life did something to probably, either increase that wealth or decrease that wealth, to dissolve that relationship or put that relationship to challenge that frame. All right. But what life doesn't do is it doesn't do that to take you away from your identity, because you still a child of God, right? You still are created by the Most High, which is why you can take a situation and learn from it and take these lessons and be able to apply it in a different way, or get in a relationship, or have three marriages, or have a situation where you're conflicting with a friend and then y'all get over that and now y'all relationship is stronger, where you can have the money and then not have it and then get it again, right? It's so, and that's why I created that space between 0 and 1, where it's like, the space between zero and one is unlimited. It's integers, right? It's unlimited potential, right? And because we live in this space between 0 and 1, we have unlimited possibility. So we can take our life and we can create anything with it when we want to. And that's because our identity, right? That's because our identity, what God created us to be, how our brain works, how our heart works, how our nervous system works, and things like that, right? There's this divinity in us that can supersede or outgrow any transgression, right? Transmute that. All right. Listen, most inner critics were born in childhood survival. Okay, so most of our inner critics was born in childhood survival. Listen, your self talk is often your mom's voice, your dad's voice, your friend's voice, your teacher's tone, right? Your past trauma really wrapped in this internal dialogue. So understanding that the inner critic is not a truth teller is your first liberation. All right. All of these things are going to come up. All of these things are going, good morning, Miss Lorraine. All of these things are going to come up. We're going to hear the doubt. We're going to hear the thoughts in our head. The thing about it is that we don't have to agree with it. Just because we hear it doesn't mean it's true. And a lot of us is allowing what's coming up in our head to be true for us. And it's like, no, you're the driver now. You know, that's the passenger talking. That's the people in the back seat talking, right? But you the driver, you still get the power to accelerate, you get the power to stop, you got the steering wheel, you got control over the drive and all of that. And that is so important for you to know when these voices start to come up as we navigate our obstacles, or this inner critic starts to come up and tell you something different than who you are. Okay. Listen, your identity is not an outcome. It's in the ownership. Okay. Your identity is not in the outcome, it's in the ownership. All right. Listen, obstacles invite you to own your voice, not your results. Okay. You can lose a job, you can lose a person, you can lose a plan, and still walk in purpose when your worth isn't tied to what happened. Right. And guess what? In your mind, you may hear the passenger talking, and you may hear the people in the backseat talking. But you, as the driver, right? That's your voice, and you get to say who you are, even in the loss of a job, even in the loss of a person, even though the plan didn't go right, you can still walk in purpose when your worth isn't tied to those outcomes, you guys, to what happened. All right. Another thing, avoidance is a symptom of self abandonment. All right. Avoidance is a symptom of self abandonment. So, listen, when you ignore the issues, you start to shut down, you numb out, right? You're not lazy, all right? You're avoiding the pain of confronting what you believe about yourself, all right? You're avoiding the pain and the discomfort of you avoiding the pain of confronting the thing that you believe about yourself. Listen, I'm not avoiding the problem, right? I'm avoiding the emotions I have associated with the problem. This is what procrastination is all about. This is what self-sabotage is, right? You're not really avoiding the thing, you're avoiding the emotions that come up with the thing, you know. Um it's it's I need to have this conversation, but I'm scared to have the conversation about what? About what they're gonna say, right? A lot of it is so outcome based, and a lot of us are not moving is because we're in codependency with the outcome. If the outcome is not what I want it to be, then I don't feel like I need to move. And it's like, but it's so much more happening in your movement. It's like thinking you're gonna go to the gym and lift, 50 pounds and walk out with muscles. You're gonna walk out sore. You're gonna walk out challenged, but you ain't gonna walk out with a muscle. That muscle is going to build over time, right? Over the time that you continue to lift and lift and lift. But guess what? You're going to feel the consequence of the lift every time you lift it. But the muscle ain't going to come to months later. Okay. All right. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat. So a lot of times we're avoiding, and why I'm saying that is because a lot of times I do that. Ooh, gives me a blessing. Okay. So okay. So listen, so a lot of times we're avoiding the problem, right? And we're not avoiding the problem, we're avoiding the emotions that's associated with it. All right, that's associated with it. And the reason I gave the muscle analogy is because I think that we have this co-creation, or this codependency with the results, right? We have this, if I can't get this outcome, I'm going to thank you, Miss Jackie. I'm going to do this, and if this person doesn't respond how I want to respond, then it all failed apart. And it's like, no, you're doing it to teach yourself to speak your truth. You're doing it to let your nervous system know that it's okay to speak your truth. You're doing it to let every cell in your body know that this is what I desire and we're going to get in alignment with it. You're doing it for so many other reasons outside of that person's, outcome. You're doing it because practice makes better, right? You're doing it to get mastery over who you are and what you want and what you desire. You're doing it to be in more alignment with who God created you to be, right? You're doing it so that you can rebuild a relationship with self-trust in you. Okay. And a lot of times we're avoiding problems in our life because we want to avoid it because of the emotions that we associated with it. And it's okay to feel these emotions. It's okay to go through these emotions. And this is why we need to get into a container, a safe space, or get the coach or get the therapist, right, to really help us navigate that and walk through that and trigger some places and open some doors and clean out some drawers that we have stuffed and stuffed and stuff, right, so that we can start to align, advance, and accelerate in our life. All right, number six, resilience isn't built in success, you guys. It's built in the mirror. All right, so resilience isn't built in success, it's built in the mirror. Listen, the way you speak to yourself after failure matters more than how you celebrate success. Again, this is where real identity work begins. Will you still love yourself when things don't love you back? When the people, places, and things don't love you back, will you still love you? All right, I want you to ask yourself that because that is where resilience is built. That is where emotional resilience, that is where capacity is built, that is where alignment is built. And that is, we are trying to manifest the life that we want. Listen, you don't get what you want, you get who you are. Okay? You don't get what you want, you get who you are. And a lot of times we have to be the change. I think that's what Gandhi said. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the loving you. Be the person that speaks to you in a happy tone. Being the person that, that accepts you, right? Be that change that you want to see in your world. Okay. Because I think Gandhi said it, be the change you want to see in the world. But it's your world that you want to see this changes. You become that. You start to love on yourself. You start to look in the mirror and say, "Oh, I love you. You look good today. Good work. Good job." You start to see that. You start to shift the energy and the frequency and the emotions in that is around you. You start to heal spaces in you, and then you'll start to see it on the outside. All right, all right. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. So again, that question is, will you still love yourself when things don't love you back? All right. And then the last one, listen, God doesn't abandon you in delay, okay? And you don't have to abandon yourself either. Listen, God doesn't abandon you in delay, so you don't have to abandon yourself either, okay? Listen, all too often, we think we have to get it right to be worthy of grace, of peace, and of forward movement, even of forgiveness, you guys. But the truth is, grace lives in the gap. Grace lives in the gap. What is that gap? That gap between what happened and what you believe about yourself. All right. Okay. So grace lives in the gap between what happened and what you believe about yourself. Guess what? Because of what happened. All right. All right. So grace is with you. All right. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. And I love that grace lives in the gap. Somebody put that in the comments for me. Grace lives in the gap. And we need to know that because God doesn't abandon us in our delay. All right. And so we need to give ourselves permission to not abandon ourselves either. All right. So because grace does live in the gap. All right. The bottom line is that self-talk is the gateway of your identity. Obstacles don't define you, don't define who you are, but they do expose what you believe about yourself. Okay. All right. I do want to share like another truth. Okay. Self-talk becomes self-instruction. All right. You don't just listen to the inner voice, you obey it. All right. So if your self-talk says this always happened to me, guess what? You subconsciously are preparing to lose again. All right. So what I want to teach you is that you are not just talking, you're training your nervous system on what to expect in life. So this is so important because self-talk is your self-instruction. All right. So what you're saying in this moment is actually programming your nervous system of what to expect out of life, and that's why it's so important. Here's bonus number two: you can't build a new life with old language. All right. You cannot build a new life with old language, which again, why I'm introducing these intentions. I'm introducing the affirmation. If you want to do the affirmation challenge, you can go to SheilaLittle.com/affirmation, right? To do a 30-day affirmation challenge is free, right? Where you get this different affirmations. All right, listen, you can't build a new life with old language. Many people try to create a new future while speaking the language of fear, lack, and rejection. Okay, listen, if you're launching a business, if you go to launch a business, but you're saying I'm not really a leader, right? That's in direct opposite of what is required to build a business, right? So you're launching a business, but you're saying, I'm not a good leader. I'm not good with money. I'm not this, I'm not that. Well, now, like your words is not even matching what it requires to be launching a business, right? So you need to figure out what does it require for me to launch this business? What does it require for me to become this manager? What does it require of me to do this thing? And then speak in that way. All right. Because when healing starts, um, because when you're healing, another way this happens is when people are healing, right? They're on their healing journey, but the thought is maybe I still deserve this. Whatever this is, maybe I still deserve to be treated bad. Maybe I still deserve this person rejected me. Maybe I still deserve that. But you healing. And I don't know if y'all watch me on the Jessica Reedy show, but I said, when we go through healing, we kind of break up and divorce some way we see things. All right. We divorce a lot of our language. And language is so important, all right? So I want you to recognize the mismatch and really the mismatch in your language, right? And speak to you or speak in a way that 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 matches the level or yeah, that matches the level where you want to be. All right. All right. Listen, if your pattern isn't disrupted, the obstacle will recycle. Okay. If your pattern isn't disrupted, your obstacle will recycle. All right, listen, if you don't change your internal responses, life will keep giving you or keep offering. Okay, I'm gonna say that. Life will keep offering the same test. All right. If you don't change your internal responses, life is gonna say, okay, and that test can come behind your child. That test can come behind your husband. That test can come behind your wife. That test can be coming with the employee. That test can come from somebody that's standing next to you in McDonald's, right? It's the test that life is trying to get you to pass. It's offering it so you can pass, so you can get the thing. Maybe it's patience, maybe it's listen, whatever it is, right? Listen, this again means you're you're ready now to respond differently. All right. Listen, it's not a punishment, it's an invitation. All right. It's not a punishment, it's an invitation that's saying this it's an invitation that's saying you're ready now to respond differently. All right. Listen, your identity is spirit anchored, not the situation, not situation dependent. All right. Your identity is spirit anchored, not situation dependent. You are not your performance. You're not your past and you're not your pain point. So even if you've been abandoned, even if you've been overlooked, even if you've been underestimated, even if you've been rejected, even if you've been hurt, even if, all right, I want to remind you that God doesn't change his mind about you just because the plan changed. Listen, God doesn't change his mind about you just because the plan changed. All right? And that is so powerful because if I know that, then I can anchor to a place where I can now see that. I can now become that thing. So if God doesn't change his plan about his if God doesn't change his mind about me because the plan didn't change, then I don't have to change my mind about me because that outcome didn't didn't go as planned. I can still know that I'm loved. I can still know that I'm worthy. I can still know that I'm beautifully and wonderfully made. I can still know that it rains on the just and the unjust. I can still know some things, even though I can't see it on the outside. All right, all right. Let's go into our spiritual tie-in or our biblical wisdom. Listen, we're looking at the principal verse. If that made sense, if that part made sense, put a heart in the chat for me. Listen, our spiritual tie-in this morning is Isaiah 43 and 1. Isaiah 43 and 1. Listen, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. All right. Fear not. I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. All right. Even when plans fall apart, listen, your identity stays intact. You are still seen, you are still being carried, and you are still loved. All right, listen, your identity was spoken before your performance even began. You were the thing before you even did the thing. All right. Listen, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Okay. So your identity was spoken over you before any performance, anything, right, that you go into. And so we can't let those things stop us or, affect who we are. All right. Good morning, Rashana. Good morning, cousin. All right. So listen, your identity was spoken of you before your performance began. Listen, this verse really grounds us in the truth that your identity is not something you earn. It was something you were born with. It is your birthright, especially when things fall apart. It's so important that we know this because your inner critic may say you're a failure. Your inner critic may say you're not enough. All right. But Isaiah 43 reminds you that your name is known, that your worth is already spoken, and that you belong, not because of what works out or what didn't, right? But because of who you are. All right. So this is the spiritual foundation of self-validation, right? When the world withdraws its approval, you gotta know the creator didn't that the creator didn't. And I do know that there's some religions, I guess it's coming up in my spirit to say this. I do know that there are some religions that'll punish you. There are some religions that will disbar you. There are some religions that will say, no, you did that thing and you disbarred or you a sinner or this or whatever, you know. But we know that Yahshua Messiah came to redeem you. Okay. All right. So your identity is there. Listen, this is an inner reframe that you can do. I don't need perfect outcomes to prove that I'm valuable. Right. I was chosen before I ever achieved anything. All right. When I first read that, I think that it healed a part of me, right? This fact that I was chosen to come through my mom and dad. Right? Just seeing it in that way, it just healed a part of me that I don't know if something else could have done. I always saw, me as a mistake from my mom and dad, even though I know that birth is divine, right? The way my mom and dad got together, I just feel like, oh, it was a mistake, or they said it's a mistake or whatever. And when I started to really understand that, like, no, you were chosen to come to your mom and dad, like you were chosen to be here, right? I think it healed a part of me, healed a wound that my mom and daddy could never have healed, right? So I don't need perfect outcomes to prove that I'm valuable, right? I was chosen before, I ever achieved anything. All right, all right, all right. If that made sense, put a heart in the chat for me. All right, our promise verse today is 2 Corinthians 4:8 and 9. Okay, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. Okay, this is 2 Corinthians 4:8 and 9. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. All right. We are perplexed, but not in despair. We are persecuted, but not abandoned. And we are struck down, but not destroyed. All right. And it just reads, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not despair, but not dis- but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. Listen, life can stretch you, but it doesn't get to define you. All right, listen, this passage really speaks directly to the tension, right, that we live in, especially especially those who have equated success to safety, right? Or results with your identity, right? The scripture does not promise ease, It doesn't promise ease. It acknowledges the pressure. It acknowledges the pain. It acknowledges the setbacks, right? But it reframes them from the inside out. All right. Listen, hard pressed but not crushed. You can feel the weight of disappointment, right? You can feel the weight of disappointment and still know you won't be destroyed by it. Okay. Perplexed, but not in despair. You don't have to have all the answers and stay anchored in you. You don't have to have all the answers and still stay anchored in peace. All right. Struck down but not destroyed. Listen, setbacks don't cancel your purpose. All right. They clarify your resilience. Okay. What's coming up is that scripture that says we fall 7 times and we still get up. Right. So struck down but not destroyed. Setbacks don't cancel your purpose. Listen, it clarifies your resilience. So here's the inner reframe that you can do. You can be discouraged and still powerful. So I can say it as an I statement. I can still be discouraged and still powerful. This hit hard, but it didn't break me. All right. God in me means that my identity outlasts my circumstances. The God in me, that means that my identity is going to outlast the circumstance. All right. What plan, when plans fall apart, okay, when plans fall apart, the inner critic might say, you always mess things up. You should be further along by now. Maybe you weren't really built for this, right? But this verse really gives language to the spiritual connotation. Listen, I'm pressed, but I'm not crushed. I'm confused, but I'm not consumed. And I'm hurting, but I'm still here, still held, and still hold, you guys. Listen, these verses really teach you how to spiritually separate pressure from personal failures, okay? It invites you to really acknowledge the hardships without acknowledge the hardships without really internalizing them. Listen, it aligns perfectly with today's self-validation Friday message because listen, it gives you permission to feel the disappointment without being the disappointment. You hear me? It gives you permission to feel the disappointment without being the disappointment. It affirms that your identity is resilient even when your life feels uncertain. All right. And it offers spiritual self-talk grounded in truth, not your trauma. Not your trauma, you guys. And we have to remember this verse. Romans 8 and 28. In all, and we know that all things work together for good. That all things work together for good. So of even disappointment, you guys, is part of the design. It's nothing is wasted, not even this. All right. So this verse, Romans 8:28, and all things work together for good. This verse isn't a passive hope that everything will turn out okay. But it is a radical invitation to reframe your relationship with disappointment. All right. So when something doesn't go your way, it doesn't mean God is gone, right? Or that you fail. It just means that there's still wisdom unfolding in you. All right. Listen, the God in you is still working, even when life feels broken. You're not. All right. Even in confusion, there's movement. Even in delay, there's development. Okay. Even if even if even if this doesn't go your way, or even if this didn't go the way you wanted, it's not wasted, you guys. Something good is coming from this. And you just have to believe that, even when you don't see it yet. All right? Even when you don't see it yet. All right? So Miss Rashonda said, without pain, there's no gain. Lessons and blessings. Just say that. With God, you can get through any storm. Amen. Amen. Okay. Okay. Yes. All right. So these verses really teach you that, and that was three. I did do three, just so you know. I did the Second Corinthians 4, 8 and 9 as the principal verse, and then Isaiah 40 43:1 as the principal verse. The promise verse was 2 Corinthians 4:8 and 9. And then I kind of did that backup verse. Um, where's my backup verse? Romans 8:28, right? Because we have to know that all things work for the good. All right. Listen, these verses really teach us that they are not that. These verses really teach us that you are not defined by your disruptions, right? That there is value, right? That your value doesn't vanish with missed goals, that your value doesn't vanish with changed outcomes. Listen, God's presence isn't proven by our success, but by our stillness, but by our wisdom, and by our identity in the storm, when we're in the storm. Okay. The core of this message is really that when your when plans shift in your life, right, your work doesn't. That when plans shift in your life, your work doesn't. When the voice in your head starts to spiral, listen, you have the spiritual truth to come back, right, to get back in that driver's seat. All right. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. All right, and let's put this into practice on this morning. All right. I thank you guys for staying with me on this series. We're wrapping up. We are wrapping up another series. I think this is series 4. It's series 3, February, March, April, right? And I'm excited about next month's series. Um, I'm excited to bring that to you. So, how do we put this into practice? Well, what we want to do is we want to write down one thing that didn't go. Write down one thing that didn't go your way recently. All right, and then we want to number 2, identify the lie your inner critic told you about that. All right, identify the lie your inner critic told you about that. And then number 3, write a new affirmation that really anchors, right? Anchors um, you in truth. All right, and if you want a journal prompt to journal on this weekend, um, your journal prompt is going to be what truth, what truth do I remember about who I am? What truth do I remember about who I am? And what truth do I remember about who I am, even when life doesn't go my way? I'm going to put that up here for you guys. Okay. And then our affirmation for today. Okay. My value is not determined by my outcome. I still, I'm still chosen, I'm still capable, and and I am chosen, I'm still capable, and still becoming. All right. And I think that's the part of life that we got to understand that we are always becoming. All right. We're becoming what we need for our future because we've already experienced our past. And our past needed that version of us, but our future, we have to give ourselves permission to affirmation. All right. Um, we're all becoming, all right, and we're becoming what we need to be for our future because our past needed what it needed. So it needed you to be what you are right now. But your future, if it's calling for something different, if you're feeling this this need to seize control of your life, this need to change, is because it's something within you that's saying, hey, I need you to do this thing or live in your truth or do this because you're going to need it. Okay. It's the evolutionary part of us. All right. All right. And it's okay to change. It's okay. It's okay to transform in that way. All right. Listen, today, this is our intention today. I validate myself. I speak my truth over shame and I walk in present and I walk with peace even when plans shift, even when the plans shift. All right. And I said this last Friday, and I'm gonna challenge you to do it again. Listen, record a 60-second video. This is your challenge first today. Record a 60 this record a 60-second voice note to yourself saying what you needed to hear the last time something didn't work out. and then play it, when the critic returns. And we know that I'm going to give you a call, a challenge, and a charge that you could take into this weekend. So today I'm calling you and I'm asking, listen, what inner truth are you holding? What inner truth are you holding on to today? And then the challenge is, what will you speak over yourself the next time plans change? And then I'm going to charge you. My charge today is, listen, negotiate your life, not with perfection, but with your presence and peace. Okay? With presence and peace. If today's session resonated with you, and you are walking away with some insight on today, listen, drop a fire in the chat for me on this morning. Drop a fire in the chat and let's celebrate our growth together, right? Let's celebrate our growth together because um I really want you to know that I really wanted to have a conversation about when life or when the outcomes don't go as planned, what do you do? Okay? Because just know that life is going to challenge you. Life is going to push back. It is the universal law. Okay. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. All right. And I hope that this series really blessed you on this month. Right. I hope that you were encouraged to prioritize your values. I hope that you were encouraged to learn more about those universal laws, to really learn how to act in purpose, right? And hopefully this week, talking about navigating obstacles. I hope that you shifted into really accepting that obstacles come with this, right? Resistance is going to come, and how do I build a mindset where I can become more receptive of that? If you identify that these are areas that you're challenged, I will encourage you to seek out help. Get a therapist to work on some of those wounds. Get a coach to really help you move forward with the plan for your life. And I know that life stands for, that life stands for your love of self, for your interactions with others, for your focus, and for your emotions. I want to say I thank you. I thank you on today. And I want to always remind you that if you can shape it in your mind, okay, you can have it in your life. If you can shape it in your mind, you can have it in your life. I love you. I love you. I love you. And I will see you on Monday when we jump into our next series. Have an awesome, 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 awesome weekend. Till later.